welcome today, Tuesday, September 19th. Just as a little bit of a heads up, when we start, a couple of people have done these StreamYards today and they've had issues with them. This is actually being recorded right now on YouTube. But we're going to keep chatting away and hope for the best and see what goes on. It's always great to get together with people who I've met in along the way. Linda Brubaker and I, we first met, I believe, was on one of Brenda Miller's VIP calls. And I think for me, the biggest thing about it was we got to know each other through those conversations. We got to know each other through being part of the team and having conversations about things. And it was just really great to get to learn about people. And I think for me, that's been one of the best things about the whole experience with doing the LinkedIn Lives is meeting people and finding out about them. And so, Linda, you're telling me before you're based out of Chicago, which
I am.
I happen to love a lot. I've been there a few times. So why don't you tell me, I'm more of the, I focus a lot more with the 45 and older people, and that's kind of my thing. Is there one specific area that you're more have a specific expertise in? I know you go at things a little bit differently than me, so it might be helpful to kind of mention that a little bit in the beginning.
So I work with a wide variety of people, but I actually started out in the job search coaching at 50 and older.
Okay, really?
Yeah, when we were doing some work through ARP. And that's the way I got into the job search coaching. I did that for a half a year as part of a grant program. But after that, discovered that people who are our age,
right,
and now people are talking about being older as being actually 40, not 45. I do a lot of work with people who are in that age range because it's that whole idea of how do you leverage that experience in the right way without looking too old and out of date. But I also do a lot of work recently with people who are coming back to work, whether you've taken a break, career break, for parenting or anything else, as well as people who are trying to make that transition from one area to another.
I think, and we, since I started at Lehigh Harrison especially, I'm finding a lot of people of our age who are looking for the first time in a while for jobs.
Yeah.
And, it's amazing. We take certain things for granted in our space, and you realize early on that you can't do that. A lot of the people in our space, we assume people have a LinkedIn profile, and they don't. I mean, when you think about it, you would think that, but they don't, for whether they didn't need to before, or in some cases they may have started one and forgot about it, and then it becomes, I need this. What do I do?
It's social media. I don't want to be on social media.
Exactly. And then it becomes a discussion about, okay, you may have a LinkedIn profile from before, and then you got to update a little bit. There's nothing to it right now. There's nothing that sets it apart. And then I see the ones that are just a resume cut and paste. But again, this is the mindset. So, I mean, what are some of the strategies that you would recommend to someone who's just getting on the platform or hasn't been on for a while? I mean, some of the things that you would suggest that they do.
I suggest actually that they look at a lot of the profiles of other people to see what's out there and what other people are putting out and talking about. One of the things that I find is important to tell people is that LinkedIn is not just your resume.
Exactly. Yes.
It's an opportunity to showcase who you are and what makes you different. So it's once you get that profile up there, it's that whole idea of how do you present yourself? Okay. And how do you make yourself an active participant in the process?
Yeah, I think for me, and you bring up a good point, a lot of times I have people do searches for jobs that they want or they're interested in, get an idea from the job specs, what the skills are, get an idea. In some cases, it may be that the job you're looking for is not even the job you think you're looking for because the titles are different.
You're right. And one of the things that I tell people is that titles are so different from company to company, and what you've done is what's important. What you want to do is important. So instead of necessarily looking for a job title, look for that activity, that skill set, and search for jobs that match that.
And, I was mentioning this before in the call. I'm working with someone who does not have a LinkedIn profile. They are starting from ground zero. I mean, here in New York, that means something different, but so
No, I understand.
yeah. But so we started out with the basics. We started out with the fact that um, here's how you start a profile. You know, here's the steps. And we're talking about someone who's not super computer literate.
Hmm.
And he created he looked at his resume, created a couple things. He didn't have a picture up yet, and we actually did a training session. Well, this is how you connect with someone. He looked me up, and we connected, and he put a personalized connection request. But now he's out there with me as a connection. And do I connect with more people? And then I said to him, well, it's going to be kind of hard because no one's going to really know who you are, whether you have a picture or not. So the question then became, what do you do next? So what we started to talk, and I asked a bunch of people what they thought about, and they all said the same basic thing. You have to build out a profile with
Hmm.
different components because there's too much uncertainty about someone. They may be the best person in the world, but they have no idea who you are. And would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I think, especially with all the fake profiles out there, it becomes harder. One of the things that I find is that when people don't have that profile to begin with, getting them started is tough. They want to only connect with people they know.
Mm-hmm.
And well, I haven't talked to these people in a long time. Why should I connect with them? Why should they connect with me? Making those initial ideas of why you should connect is the first thing, telling them why those connections are important. And then it's how do you go out and find them. But yeah, if somebody has, I was working with somebody the other day who has one connection, and that one connection is me.
Mm-hmm.
And then how do you go about doing it to get them to even think about the idea of building those connections? Who do they look for?
And part of that also is the fact that as you say, you got to have a picture up there first, right off the bat, because that's gonna humanize you. And I think more than anything else, I said to him, and I actually did this part of the post today. When you craft the about section, it doesn't have to be this Pulitzer Prize winning thing. Just put some stuff down to begin with. Have some stuff about your jobs, but just build out the basics, and then start with family. That start with friends that you know, and then build it from there. And it will take some time, but it's worth it.
It absolutely is. And those are great suggestions. And then one of the other things that I suggest is that instead of just sending the connection request
Mm-hmm.
and saying, join my network, and that's important, ask them, would you like to
Mm-hmm.
join the network? That gives a sense of control, especially when it's somebody that you don't know or that you haven't talked with in a long time. Let's do this and let's reconnect. Let's talk about other things. That seems to work as well.
And this person is like a lot of people in the industry. He went to work one day and they shut off all of his computer access.
Oh,
So he doesn't have access to email addresses there. He doesn't have access. And this is a sad story all around. So how do you get a hold of people? Well, the good thing about it is that you have an opportunity with LinkedIn to try to find people.
mhm.
Um, and that's a starting point. But then his pushback was, and this kind of really frustrated me. He said, why do I want to connect with people I used to work with now? I mean, what's the benefit to that? Don't I want to? Aren't they my competition? So
Yeah,
different
that
discussion.
mindset is tough to get past because
Exactly.
it's like, what can they do for me? It's
Yeah.
not just about that. It's building those relationships because you don't honestly know where they can go.
And that's a big part of the mindset is the whole idea of networking because yes, you can have the LinkedIn profile, but what are you going to do next? And it's getting out of your comfort zone. When I was on LinkedIn in 2008 and I lost my job, I didn't know what to do.
Hmm.
And it can be hard. And you have to build a relationship. Even the people I've connected with now, I would never have connected with in the beginning because I didn't know that I could actually.
And I think that's true. I think a lot of us didn't realize that we could connect with somebody we'd never met before. So, can I give a quick suggestion to the people who are watching today?
Absolutely.
Go into the uh, the group of people who are on the call.
Hmm.
Send a connection request to them now. You've already got something in common. If you haven't built out your profile or you haven't got a lot of connections, it's a great way to get started because you already have something in common.
So we're going to start out by letting some of the people that we know we're on. Merrill Cass is here checking in from Paramus, one of my good friends who I actually saw in person. I have Carol McCullough, and Carol McCullough actually runs a networking group too. And that's another great thing to do is if you go out there, attend networking events, and I know David Mills from New Hampshire, and I think by now I know this is Al Smith. I say that because Alex Freund put a comment after. And it's funny because Al was someone who I wanted to reach out to because this person is actually based in Atlanta. He lives in Atlanta and he wants to go to events. And I said, why don't you go in person? So he's going to probably go to events there. So Alex actually had this question. Linda, one's LinkedIn profile is futile unless someone looks at it. What does it take to be effective in attracting lookers? And Alex likes to ask these questions all the time, and I think it's great. So what would be some of your thoughts about that?
So the picture is important. You have to have that there. I'm a believer in the about section. You need a good headline that's really going to intrigue me, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's your initial magnet. There has to be something there that intrigues me enough to want to look more. I really like the about section because in those first 3 lines, you can really attract my attention. And I want it to be personally, the ones that I find most attractive are the ones that tell me more about you and your story rather than just repeating what's on the resume or what's in the profile and the experience section.
I'm also a big believer in using skills. And what most people are just finding out now, again, we talk about having a skills section, but then there's the ability to put each of those skills within each job and then add them as top skills.
Mm-hmm.
And so doing that is a great thing. And I'm finding again and again things that I take for granted that people don't realize they can do. People don't realize they can move their skills around
Yes.
because you only can show the top 3 or 4 skills, and people don't. And it's no one's fault, but no one has told them how. LinkedIn doesn't necessarily have isn't very intuitive from a user perspective. But if you put those top skills up there again, you're going to increase the likelihood that you're putting your best foot forward.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people don't realize that you can ask for endorsements for those skills because that's also an important aspect. That helps to showcase what you can do.
And again, what I see a lot of times on resumes that are older, I see the old references upon request, which and a lot of things on resumes are very old and all that. And what I always say is it's basically that's what you can do in terms of recommending people. You can recommend people on LinkedIn. You can reach out to them there. I think that is so very, very important.
I agree with you. There are a lot of things on resumes that just really don't belong anymore, just as there are things on LinkedIn that should be there that really aren't. That whole idea of adding skills under each job, I have to admit that I was a little hesitant about that in the beginning because
Right.
when I looked at those profiles as they first came out with those skills sections, not just at the bottom, but with each job, to me, they looked a little busy. They were more difficult to read, but the more I see them, the more I understand the value of including the skills under each job.
I think the biggest challenge is that all of us, and we joke about this a lot. Again, I'm going to, again, we know about this, unfortunately. Yes, so we've had a lot of complaints about this. And one of the things that we did, and the error message that comes up is an error from LinkedIn. StreamYard actually posted something on their website that they're having an issue. So what we've been doing is we've been putting this, it's still being recorded, and we're still here, obviously. It's also streaming on YouTube, and we will make sure this is available later on. So this is one of those hiccups or these learning moments, as we all say. We've all been learning from each other. So the complaints have been going on. We've all been posting in on our events and all throughout about this. So we're not exactly sure why. We just know it's happening. So just to let you know. So David wants to talk about recommendations. So perfect example. When you go to your profile, there's a drop down like anything else, and it can where it says either request a recommendation or ask for a recommendation again.
Mm-hmm.
And then what you would do is you would let's say David, you want to recommend me. I'm not suggesting you should, but you would but it would go to recommend someone, and then it would ask you who you want to recommend. It would be a first connection because it would have to be that. It would ask how you know them, and you would have the ability, if you ask for the recommendation, you can give them some suggested content, or you can just leave it up to them. If you recommend, if you recommend me, you would put some um, information in there too, and I would have the ability to edit it, and sometimes or whatever, and then I would post it up there. But it gives me an idea, and this is actually what happened today too. I should probably do a post about how to do this, because again, if you go to that section there, we talk about block and report. There's a place over there about recommendations. So um, to Andrew's point here, is there a way to list skills that are not in the LinkedIn drop down menu? Well, I have skills that are not in the LinkedIn drop down menu. I've created my own skills. Anyone can. The downside is that those skills won't be searchable by a recruiter.
Right.
From a branding standpoint, um, I put down LinkedIn introvert. That's a skill. Now, again, it's just part of my brand. So you have to make sure the skills, and to some extent, you want to go to what the jobs are that are out there. When you do a search for a job, you'll find out what the skills are, or you can read the job specs and make sure they're there. So you can go up to 50 skills. Again, it really depends what you're looking to do. Um, but the short answer is yes, you can.
And I recommend that if you're running up against that 50 limit, go back through and reevaluate which ones you really want to do. It's not, again, about everything you've ever done, David.
Mhm.
It's about what skills you have that match the jobs you want to continue to do.
And yes, I put introvert as a skill because it's my brand, if you will. Um, I call myself LinkedIn introvert. There, Brenda has a skill for herself, LinkedIn something. We can all call ourselves whatever we want to. It's just, and David, if if you can call yourself that too. You can, people, it's whatever you want to do to market yourself. Now, I'm calling it a skill because that's what LinkedIn calls it. It's something which also people have to think about for their heading. The big mistake a lot of people make is they don't realize they can change their headline to something besides their last job. Because again,
Absolutely.
it's not intuitive. But
It's
people
really
don't.
not. And by the way, I want to talk about LinkedIn introvert as a skill,
Absolutely.
because I actually think that it is, whether
Okay.
it's LinkedIn or anything else. Being an introvert is actually a skill set that
Mhm.
you can take advantage of on your job. The introverts are the ones who listen more, who ask good questions because they don't necessarily want to talk. But by asking those questions, okay, by listening and maybe coming up with the ideas even after the fact,
Mhm.
that introversion is really a good thing. It's more about being that facilitator
Mhm.
of other conversations, the synthesizer of ideas, and moving the idea from one stage to another. So, in my view, being an introvert is a skill set, and it's a very important one.
Which also brings up something that happens a lot too, and that's that when people actually start writing or doing stuff on LinkedIn, anything they can do is searchable. People don't realize when you go on LinkedIn, you can search and things will come up. And this is the thing I do with a lot of my presentations. I show this a lot at Lee Hecht Harrison. I do searches for like a keywords like I'm hiring or we're hiring. And then all the recruiters will come up within those if they have it there. And I will break it down further by location and by um, industry. Now, it's not a guarantee that they're going to find a job for you, but it's just a way to show from a search perspective. You have a search, everything is searchable there. You can do a search for open to work. You can do a search for any keywords you want. And I think it's such an important thing to realize that becomes a real aha moment when you're doing things like that.
Your whole idea about using LinkedIn as a search engine,
Yeah.
I think, is something that a lot of people really don't understand and need to hear, because so many of us, especially if you're just getting into LinkedIn for the first time,
Hmm.
or you haven't been using it very much, you don't think about that. You think about it as this static platform.
Hmm.
And it's really not. It should be an interactive platform, both from your perspective as well as from the perspective of anybody trying to find you.
And I always say along the lines, one of the most searchable things to do is if you do a search for events on a job title. Let's say I'm a project manager. I can do a search for events that have project manager in them. I can do a search for insurance salesperson, and I can find events there that I can attend.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, it's not intuitive to a lot of people to think that way. It's like, well, I'm on LinkedIn. I have a profile. I need to connect with people. I need people to connect with me. I need to apply for a job.
Right. Or I'm on LinkedIn. How come nobody's contacting me?
Right.
Right.
And again, it's about building relationships. Every time, and you had a great idea. You're on the call here now, and people um, would engage. So we're going to do this as an exercise now. David, how would I list it in my LinkedIn headline? Just introvert, or say highly introverted, LinkedIn introvert, proud introvert? So let's actually talk this out a little bit. I quote again, proud introvert. Again, if you're going to put, and this is my take, if you're going to put something like that in your headline, you want to mention the about section why you're putting it there.
Absolutely.
Because in and of itself, it doesn't make a difference. But because I talk about I'm a LinkedIn introvert and I say jump in the LinkedIn waters fine, which I do that as part of getting that together. So what makes you a proud introvert? And then that's the about section, the first few lines of it. Again, introverts rock. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, whatever you want to do, it'll get people's attention. Um, I work with extroverts a lot, and it's very challenging, but it's a good thing for me to stay on top of things. But think about this, you're marketing yourself. And again, people on LinkedIn in job search, it's very hard for them to intuitively think of themselves as marketing themselves.
Yeah. Nobody wants to have to think about that. Especially if you're talking about the people, we started with this conversation with people who are 45 and older,
Mm-hmm.
right? You've been in the same job forever. It's like the job has always been there. Why?
Right.
I don't know how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I should just be able to put myself out there. And how come I can't get a job in a week?
So I see Michelle is saying it's content connectiveness,
Oh, I like that.
the ability of bringing things together. Yes.
Nice phrase.
I worked with Michelle a while back at Bed Bath & Beyond as a senior manager. So, from a branding aspect, and again, content connectiveness. It's like Peter Piper here. But it's true though. You're looking, different people have different things. We all know Joey Himmelfarb, and
Mm-hmm.
Joey has a brand, and we all have a brand. Brenda Miller with her enthusiastically unemployable or different things. We all have brands. Now, Linda, you must have a brand too.
I'm getting there.
Okay.
So right now, what I talk about is helping you to find your job your way or
Okay.
your next forever job, because I don't believe in forever jobs.
Mm-hmm. And that's what's great. And that's one of the hardest things, honestly, is to figure out what your brand is. It doesn't, Alex Freund talks about that a lot. And over the years, I kept changing off my brand a little bit. Is this who I am? And then you realize that moment. So if you're just an introvert, you're just an introvert. But what makes you an introvert? Because
Right.
again, there's different types of introverts. I am very extroverted with family. I am not introvert. I am not introverted there. But at the same time, I'm a total introvert when I'm going to a networking event or
Oh,
I'm at a chamber of commerce or something like that.
yeah, those in-person events, absolutely. And to me, it's not just the introversion for those networking events that are in person, but it's also actually many social situations if I don't know a lot of people.
What I've done, what I used to do a lot when I went to events, is I would take someone with me as a wing person. I would take either a friend or someone from the event, and we would be there together and we would be chatting. And then a third person would come in saying, here are these two people chatting. So let me get involved. And that became an icebreaker. And we would see, not going alone made a big difference. I wouldn't go there like, oh my God, where do I have to start? And that wing person was someone who I trusted. It was different wing people, different friends. So sometimes that helps a lot. So again, as Lynn said, introverts need a wing woman or wing man for in-person events. And
Absolutely.
it
And
makes
here
such
on,
a, go ahead.
I was going to say, and here online, what's nice is that you can express your content, your ideas, without having to feel that pressure of that in-person reaction.
So I think one question I get a lot and again, and I'm not talking about the open to work banner because that's a whole different discussion. When people have just lost their jobs and they all want to let the world know, you know, how do you separate yourself out in a post that you want to let people know you're available without kind of saying the same stuff that everyone else does? Do you have any thoughts about that?
I know that a lot of people put those out there, and you have to be able to tell people that you're looking.
Okay.
Absolutely. But I want to know what you're looking for and what makes you stand out. What's your, for lack of a better phrase, your value proposition?
Mm-hmm.
What I call it to some extent is talk about your journey and what you're looking for as your next step. And what your superpower is that you can bring to that next step.
So there you go, superpower.
Mm-hmm.
My superpower is
Exactly.
in your heading.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Again, and so you think about it that way, and the whole idea of what's in it for me as your next employer. It's and it what I find a lot also, I'm struggling the best way to say this diplomatically. People that have just lost their jobs, their past experience on their resumes, you can tell it from they've thought about it, they've got it down, they have all the stuff down. They throw something together from their most recent job because they have to get something out there instead of really kind of thinking about the stuff they've done.
Yeah. Too much of what I see on LinkedIn in those experience sections or on resumes in the experience sections is a listing of duties. I don't want to
Tasks.
see that.
It's
Right.
tasks. Yeah.
I want to know what you did, and what you did is very different than what you were asked to do. So it's not the responsibilities, it's not the daily activities. It's what did you accomplish? What were you doing that made a difference?
And Michelle, you can definitely steal anything here. I mean, this is just the idea of brainstorming. I mean, think about it from the perspective that you have something different from everyone else, and you can solve a problem in a way that no one else can, whatever it
Mhm.
is. And you'd be surprised. And it could be a little thing. One thing I find a lot is when people are bilingual or can speak multiple languages, that is such a relevant thing to put down, and it's not an afterthought.
No, because whether they're looking for that second language or not, the ability to be able to do that, to
Hmm.
use in effect several different portions of your brain, to think in different ways is huge.
And at the same time, also, again, I always remind people on LinkedIn have a backup email address because I've already had a couple of people whose email addresses were at work, their former place of employment. And you need to have the ability to get a hold of your profile. I think it's so important to reach out to people like us, but even more than anything else, ask others. People, you can ask a question on a post to the whole world. I mean, it's not the old days where you can't ask a question.
Right.
And that's part of the mindset of our generation. We don't ask questions. We're not the ones that are going to raise our hand. Are there any questions? That's just not what we do. We know everything, and that's not the case.
That's exactly right. We ask and learn from everybody else too.
We all learn, and even today, we all worked out amongst ourselves what the issue was. I mean, we kind of figured things out. I think you really need to feel comfortable in putting out certain things that are there besides your resume. Um,
Exactly.
so, Alex, okay. I noticed that people between the ages of 38 to 45 often have this. They're looking for professional growth and promotion. I remember when I was there. Um, I think the question that comes up with professional growth and promote, people don't always say what they're looking for in the future. They make an assumption, you know, professional growth and promotion. I think it's so important to constantly be growing, and growing means all different things.
Absolutely. In fact, you can't expect that if you're looking to grow within your own company, it's up to you to take some responsibility for where you want to go and for making that known. Whether it's doing professional development, whether
Mhm.
it's part of your performance appraisal to say, here's where I see my next step. How can you help me get there? What do I need to do? And if you're looking outside, you need to also talk about what it is you're specifically looking for. Don't just put out a standard resume or LinkedIn profile and say, find me, you figure out what I can do.
And I always think it's a good idea for people to go back and look at other people's profiles to find out why they're there. The one thing LinkedIn doesn't make very clear, when you're doing a search for people with the profiles, anyone will show up. Your second connections will show up before your first connections. And for some reason, the second connect, you want to make it, if possible, by first connections when you do a search, unless you don't have a lot, because it's not very intuitive how LinkedIn makes some of its determinations as to how people show up.
Right.
Which is why I'm leery about making this as major advice, but definitely on job specs. Go to a job spec, and I said this yesterday, look at this job. You're not applying for the job, but you're looking at the job. It's in your space. What do you think? Could you do the job? Do you have those skills?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yes, well, then why aren't they there?
Right. And the other thing is, many times if you're talking about job growth, whether it's inside or outside the company, it's okay to look for a job and apply for a job where you only match 70% of the specs. If you're matching 100%, there's no growth. You've been there, done that. You've got the t-shirt. It may be a different company, different logo, but you already done that before. You're not growing.
And the thing with job specs is they're wish lists too. We all know this. And in some cases, and I found this, the job spec that's there is the job that was there before, but the skills, the requirements have changed. But again, they don't know that until they go through the process.
Exactly right.
With people.
So my big advice is don't screen yourself out.
Okay. And it also means if you get rejected by an ATS, don't give up, because you still may be able to get the job. Or if it turns out that they're talking to other people and those people fall through, you want to be available. So, and I'm seeing over here, Terry is actually on YouTube, and I think that is so important. I wish, and this is the whole thing with communication, we all are kind of, we have to deal with the technology as we get it. We're at their beck and call, and I think it's so important. But I think as you're having these conversations, and again, it's little things, and I've said this to people too, and make sure when you're on an interview, make sure you have a good background. Make sure your connectivity works. I mean, I gave as much of a heads up as I could today to people who are going to come to this event, but you want to have a backup plan. And the backup plan today was for people to go to YouTube. The backup plan might be, well, can we have a phone call? And if you can kind of know that ahead of time, it certainly helps, because they'll just move on to the next person.
Exactly. And I like your idea too about pivoting again in terms of the technology. If you get rejected or your resume doesn't get seen the first time, it's okay to resubmit or to find somebody else that you can walk in through. Okay. When you were talking about other people that you can try and connect with, especially in the beginning, you're trying to find out what the specs might be for a certain job. Go to the company's LinkedIn page, find people, and then search on people who are doing the job you want to do. Look at what their profiles say, what their skill sets are.
Or you go to a company there and maybe you find a hiring manager and you just dumbly say, I'd like to know more about the company. I was interested in a job A, B, C, D, which of course I got rejected from the ATS. But again, just putting it out there, because sometimes they don't know.
Exactly. And you know that an ATS doesn't normally reject you per se.
Right.
Okay. Unless it totally can't read your resume. It's more of an electronic file cabinet in many cases. But the ATS searches and prioritizes resumes based on the skills, the keywords that the recruiter puts in. So those keywords, those skills are really important in order to get yourself through there. But just not getting that initial phone call doesn't make any difference. You can still go out and look at something. And I recommend a lot of people do some of these informational interviews. So you reach out to somebody else in the company, not can you send my resume in, unless you know that they're either the hiring manager or the recruiter, in which case you say, hey, I've already applied. Would you go take a look? Okay.
Right.
And we find that recruiters actually like that because you're taking that kind of an initiative. But it's also, what kind of advice do you have? How did you prepare yourself for this kind of a role? And then you build that relationship. and you find out what things they found were important, and then you know what you can stress.
Or you ask them, what do you like about working at the company? A little bit of a pivot, like you're saying, because people like to share that. And
Exactly.
that's an indirect way of saying I'm interested in working there without saying, because all of us can tell from a mile away when someone reaches out and they're say, hire me, hire me, hire me. It's just the way it is. And it's just because people aren't aware of how they can do a better job.
Hmm. And that subtle way is much more effective. You want, it's like anything else. You want people to be interested enough to want to move you forward or to give you advice and information. And people are much more interested in talking about themselves and sharing their journeys
Mm-hmm.
than they are in other areas. It's a great way of getting that advice. And once you build that relationship, it can pivot to other things.
And
But
then
it
you
needs
also build, I'm sorry, then you build a relationship after. One of the reasons you want to connect with people is LinkedIn makes it very difficult for the whole messaging, and you're limited with the number of messages you can send out. And when your first connections, you can message each other. I would just caution anyone that does the works on LinkedIn, not everything is 100%. You may never hear back from some people. You may never get responses, and that's okay.
Mhm.
You have to think of yourself as a salesperson. You're going to try and try and try, and you just have to deal with it. And the same with if you don't hear back from a recruiter, the whole ghosting discussion.
Yeah. And that seems to be have gotten worse over time. Yeah.
Gotten worse for a lot of different reasons, and um, I think the most important thing you can do is just keep at it. And it's okay to be upset and have your up and down days, but above all, you have to just keep moving on. And I think it's so important to have networking groups, events, people to chat with. Um, Brenda does a great group. Linda, I don't know whether other topics you're going to be speaking at, but we all like to promote these events, not because we're promoting them for ourselves, but as much to let other people know about them.
Exactly. These events, whether they're online, offline, in person, they're a great way of getting you not only the information, but the support that you need. Nobody understands what you're going through in job search any more than somebody who's either helping you to do it or somebody who's going through it too. And getting that advice and that support is really important too.
So again, I would recommend working with a professional resume or talk about the metrics. How did you help the company accomplish their goals? Being specific. And I see this all the time on resumes. Resumes are task lists.
Yes.
Resumes are what I did from 9 to 5 or thereabouts every day. And I'm like, yeah, okay.
Yeah. I was working with somebody yesterday who part of that task is, again, had been in the same job forever.
Right.
Part of the task list included I opened the mail. I answered the phone. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, or I can multitask.
Mhm.
Well, who can't? Or one of my favorite ones is they use the word successful. And I'm like, if it wasn't successful, what would you put it on your resume?
Exactly. And don't tell me that it was successful. Show me what you did that was successful.
Absolutely. I think and a lot of it is just it someone has to say that to them in a diplomatic way. And I know that Terry, who's joining on YouTube, I have a client who's dead set against using LinkedIn, very challenging situation. It pushes me to develop alternatives. I think, and again, what alternatives have you been able to get them to use? Um, I think if you're not on LinkedIn, you're just kind of hurting yourself. And there's all different reasons why people may or may not want to be there. But above all, then you have to just develop a presence in other ways. You have to go out there. You have to get the word out. Um, Emailing is not going to be enough.
It's not. And I actually had somebody the other day ask me, well, the company is right in my neighborhood. Can I just walk in and hand them a resume and get an interview? And that's not the way things get done anymore.
No, you don't want to use LinkedIn. Well, you know where the company is. You have an email address. If you're not going to go on LinkedIn for yourself, go on LinkedIn to search it. Let's
Oh,
say you
yeah.
don't want to have a profile. You can still create an account, or you can still go on LinkedIn and do the searching that you need for your job search. Now, that's not the best way to go about it, but and Terry, that might be something to consider. I mean, when you say using LinkedIn, using LinkedIn from searching and all that, how is that different from doing any other searching? How is that different from going online? I mean, that's a whole different thing.
I think too many people think of LinkedIn as social media and that it's very personal. I'm sharing too much about myself, and I don't want to do that. LinkedIn really should be business networking.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, a lot of us share information about ourselves, but
Right.
as part of that process, okay, it's not that I'm telling you that I had, eggs and toast for breakfast unless there's something else that goes along with it.
Right. Well, I think part of it is also not knowing where to get started. This person I'm working with, Lee Harrison, he doesn't know where to get started. So I said to him, I said this, and I don't normally recommend this, but I said, start out by putting your resume up on LinkedIn through the steps that are going to let them build out the steps of your profile and then start updating from there, put an about section together. But if you don't really know where to start and you have content, start with that content to build out the profile. It's not ideal.
Right.
I would much rather someone create it through the different steps, but someone who's that unsure, it's a starting point. And I said, again, it is a living document. No one is going to see everything you are doing.
Yeah. You can turn off that notification that every time you make a change, you notify your network. You don't need to do that.
The other thing I recommend is people turn on the two-step verification or authentication, a very big thing these days, that you have a way if someone, if someone's trying to log into your account, um, they'll be blocked from that as much as possible. I got a notification someone was trying to access my account a while ago. Turned out the person was from overseas, and they didn't get into it. But I got a notification and sent me what the IP was and the location, and I was happy I had it set up. Um, it's
Okay, you've convinced me. I haven't done that one yet.
well because think about it this way: when you log on any secure site, they usually ask for a proof that you are who you are. Sometimes, whether it's a code or something else. And you have to do that before you get to the next step
Mm-hmm.
where you have it. If you don't have it, nothing is to stop anyone else from figuring out your password, and which you should be changing anyway. It's a good rule of thumb.
Okay.
So
One other thing in terms of profiles, I recommend that people actually get their profile verified. That you upload your government or your company ID so that it's another way of saying that this is a real person.
well, I had to do that once with Leak Harrison again because it expired. So they said it's expired, so you need to do it again. So it sent it to my Leak Harrison email address, and again, that's fine. People are very concerned, or some people, for the privacy to actually put their driver's license and that stuff up there. I understand that. Um, a lot of these places don't have a great track record in some cases, but there's so many fake profiles out there. There's
Oh,
so
there
many
are.
bad actors out there, and now with AI, it's even worse. I've had an AI type built LinkedIn profile. Someone reach out to me, and the only reason I kind of knew it was AI is because it just looked AI-ish. So again, like this is another thing from Al, who doesn't realize he doesn't have his profile set to show his face, but I know it's Al Smith. Remember to log out to keep your account fully protected. Don't be like me, who tends to forget this step. Um, it's a very dangerous world out there for sure.
Unfortunately.
But I think if you can take anything away from today, just listen to what we have to say. If possible, watch us on YouTube or later on. Um, there are some best practices out there. There's some great people. You will be able to go back to this conversation, even if you couldn't watch it. It was an event link. I'll post it again later on, and you can see this conversation and follow up with everyone. So I want to thank you, Linda, very much for joining me today from Chicago.
Absolutely. I really enjoyed it.
Great. So have a great day, everyone. Sorry for those that couldn't get on through LinkedIn Live and StreamYard. It was not StreamYard's fault. We're going to hope for the best. It's just what we all have to deal with technology. But have a great day. And I'll see everyone next week with Terry Seaman, who's joining me from YouTube. Take care.
Wonderful. Bye bye.